The number of films focusing on the Vietnam War are endless, but a 10-part, 18-hour documentary film series coming in September goes even deeper, featuring testimony from nearly 100 witnesses, from Americans who fought in the war to others who opposed it, as well as Vietnamese combatants and civilians from both the winning and losing sides. Multimedia journalist Christian Garzone takes us inside the latest project from filmmaker Ken Burns.
In September of 2017, PBS will broadcast our 10-part, 18-hour film on the history of the Vietnam War. It begins in the middle of the 19th century when the French invade Da Nang, and our first episode ends with Kennedy's inauguration. So we get up to the war and the American part of it really quickly, but then the other 9 episodes are taking us up to this present moment, trying to understand this incredibly important, incredibly revealing moment in American history. We say, almost without thinking today, that we are so divided, there's so much partisanship, and we believe that a good deal of that partisanship was born or began to metastasize back during the Vietnam War. So it's important for us to go back and unpack what actually happened and to sort of repack this in a way that we could begin to have conversations about what happened, what were the decisions that were made, who were the people involved, not just Americans, but who were the South Vietnamese, who were the North Vietnamese, who were the Viet Cong, and try to understand it from every perspective.
Great. And 18 hours. I mean, this is one of your bigger projects. I think it's even longer than the war, the World War II epic you put together. So why 18 hours?
You know, we never really know for sure how long a film is going to be when we set out to make it. So we estimate, we thought it would be about 10 or 12 hours probably, but the depth of the story, the richness of the material, the complexity of the narrative, it sort of expanded and it found its own length, honestly. And we weren't really even sure how many episodes it would be, but by the time we had put this really, really complicated story, as Ken was saying, it's almost like putting together a novel where you start in the beginning, you're not quite sure how you're going to get to the end. It just kept on evolving and accruing meaning as we added more stories. And this is the length that we think is the way to tell this story.
We start at the French, 1858, when the French sort of invade Da Nang and sort of take over Indochina. We very quickly move into the 20th century and through World War I and the birth of sort of a resistance movement against the French, and then introduce Ho Chi Minh and his activities in World War I, and then through to World War II. Really, the war begins in 45, when the Second World War ends and the French are hoping to restore, the Free French are hoping to restore their former colony and are seeking the American help as the Cold War develops. And so we follow it through the ill-fated French adventure and then into our sort of inheriting of South Vietnam, this new country, and the Diem regime, and then all that happened afterwards. The 5 American presidents, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon, who had a principal role in it. Ford will, of course, be there at the end, but the focus of the film is on that. And we want to tell this not just from the top down, the sort of the military, traditional military history, which is, you know, from the generals and the presidents and the policymakers, but from the bottom up. And so we've interviewed lots of Marines and lots of Army men and Gold Star families and helicopter pilots and bomber pilots and fighter pilots and, you know, draft protesters and draft dodgers and policy wonks and journalists, as well as South Vietnamese civilians and Army people, North Vietnamese civilians and Army people, Viet Cong fighters, all of which. I mean, we've got a moment in the film where we have an American advisor in 62, I think, and his Vietnamese Marine, South Vietnamese Marine counterpart heading toward a hedgerow, and we're interviewing the Viet Cong behind that hedgerow. And so we're able to triangulate, literally, a battle in a way that I don't think has been done before, and familiarize Americans who, if you take away Khe Sanh and Da Nang and Tet and Hue, maybe they couldn't name 5 battles of Vietnam to save their life, but everyone knows Shiloh and Appomattox and Gettysburg, and everybody knows Iwo Jima and, you know, the Battle of the Bulge. So we really felt we owed it to the country to understand what took place during this time, for a war that became deeply divisive and permitted us, I think, all the irresponsibility to ignore it and to forget what actually happened. And new scholarship and new access to Vietnam have permitted us to understand just, I think it'll be a revelation even to the veterans who were there.
On this week's Money Minute, sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union, Personal finance expert Jeanette Mack offers tips on managing your money using a prepaid card.
Keeping track of your finances isn't easy, especially if you're balancing family, work, your PT schedule, or being deployed overseas. If you're like most, you're always on the hunt for ways to simplify your budgeting to keep yourself and your family on track. You might not have thought about it, but a prepaid debit card can help. You can use them just like a regular check card, and they're just as widely accepted at retail stores and ATMs. But unlike a regular debit or credit card, you set your spending limit. So it can keep you from spending the funds you don't want to touch in your checking or savings account, and you don't have to worry about maxing out a credit limit. With a prepaid card, you choose how much money you want to load onto the card with the ability to always go back and add more when the time is right in your cash flow. If you're living on a budget, this is a foolproof way to keep yourself or even your teens on track. Most prepaid cards allow you to add companion card holders and even direct deposit from your paycheck. So now you have the secret to bringing back some much needed and deserved balance to your life and your budget.
When we return, toys from the AUSA Global Force Symposium in Huntsville. You're watching Defense News.